Hi, this is Melanie of Pardesi Reviews. And I'm joined by Katherine of totallyfilming.com and also the podcast Palandini Pate. And we're here to discuss the new Lijo Jose Pellissery film starring and co-produced with Mammootty, Nanpakal Nerathu Mayakkam, which translates to like an afternoon dream, or the official, that's the official English title, but it will also be translated to A Mid-day Slumber. So this is going to be a discussion filled with spoilers. We're really going to get into a deep dive of this film. Katherine watched it first when it came on Netflix, which just happened last week. And in our group chat, she had so much to say about it. I'm like, and I said, I'm going to watch it this weekend, and can we talk about it together, because there's just so much here to discuss. I am a huge fan of Lijo Jose Pellissery. Not every single film do I love equally, but when I saw Angamali Diaries, that was my first film of his. Absolutely blown away, like the 11-minute tracking shot at the end, just the whole tension of the film. Iba Yao is one of my favorite Malayalam films. Just the emotion and tension in that film, like, it's so incredible. This is a very different kind of film. Okay, so other Lijo Jose Pellissery films, you think about action, you think about you think about like the fight scenes in Jallikattu, where you feel like you're like claustrophobically like, oh my God, a punch is going to come in my face. Like, very different feeling to this film. And one of the key things about that is that the cinematographer of this film is Tene Aswar, who also was the cinematographer in Mammootty's film, Tamil film Perenba, which is incredible. And the cinematography in that film, I just remember completely blowing me away. We're going to talk in some details about how the cinematography of this film affects the way you as a viewer feel about this film, and how it frames it in a very, I don't know, almost like you're watching a play. A lot of times I felt like that, because we're looking through doorways, we're looking at a distance. Some of the key actresses, of course, is the actors Mammootty, of course, who is multilingual. We all know that. He's done Tamil films, he's done Telugu films, he's obviously done many Malayalam films. And so when you think about this setup of this film, where a man falls asleep and suddenly wakes up, a man who had been speaking Malayalam in the film suddenly wakes up and is speaking in Tamil, and is in a Tamil village, I was thinking to myself, okay, who is more perfect for a film like this, where someone is so comfortable in both languages? The actress, so he has two wives in the film. His Malayalam wife is Sally, played by Ramya Suvi, and then when he wakes up as this other person who's speaking Tamil in this village, Povali, the wife of Sundaram, is Ramya Pandian. And there's many other supporting characters. That the opening of the film, James is Mammootty's character. He is like sort of the tour organizer of a pilgrimage to a Catholic religious site in Valankani, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, in Tamil Nadu. And the opening scenes very much reminded me of Angamali Diaries, in a way that Angamali Diaries set the place of Angamali with all of these scenes of food and street scenes. Here we're having street scenes of this religious site, but we're getting close-ups of rosaries and different religious things that are being sold around this religious site. We're getting close-ups of people with tonsured heads and so forth. So very much setting us in this religious milieu. And so a very important scene happens when Mammootty's character James is paying for the hotel bill. I didn't write down exactly what he said, what he sees, but there's sort of a poster next, and he asks the hotel clerk about this, who says that he can't read. I think it's in Tamil, and he can't read it. James can't, and it's when you fall asleep, it's like death, and when you awake, it's like rebirth. And so what seems to be just this inconsequential little conversation is basically the key to the entire film. And
And
I know.
and one of the two influences that set this film in motion. Like we all discovered the green plywood ad,
Oh,
and
right. I
and
didn't mention that. Right.
and
And which you sent the link to that old commercial. And it is, you're right, in the credits, he talks about, that gives the idea for this film came partially from this ad where it's a little boy that just walks into this house and it's like he's greeting this older woman as if she is his wife. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if it was even a minute ad, but it just conveyed, the whole idea is from that ad is in this film.
yeah, and the thing about the poster is, I mean, here is yet another, like this film is riddled with all sorts of interesting references, and
Yeah.
this is the sorry, I'm going to mess up. Apologies to both Tamil and Malayalam readers. I don't have my speakers to prop me up here. But it's from the Tirukkural, which is a classical Tamil language text consisting of couplets. And this is one of the couplets that they've put out there. And even James notes that he knows the writer of this because he says, oh, there's a statue in Kanyakumari, which is right at the southern tip of India. So they have this little discussion, and it's just like dropped in there. And you can take it at the face value because we're told the meaning.
Right.
But for me, this was like, oh my God, I went down a whole rabbit hole researching everything about this film. And it was just
So
reference after reference after
reference after reference. And that's what we discussed in the back channel, how there are layers you can enjoy it at a surface level, and then if you know some of the references, like I would highly recommend everyone, and I'll link in the description, to watch Bharadwaj Rangan's review, because he highlights many of the classic Tamil films that are referenced, that we hear bits of dialogue from, that we hear music from, throughout the film. In fact, he says directly to the camera, Lijo, I would like to ask you, just how many Tamil films have you seen? Because it's incredible. Now, what I didn't realize is that Lijo Jose Pellissery's father was an actor. In fact, had a stage company, and the ending credits show still pictures from this theater company and from productions. So we should mention, speaking of productions, that this is a co-produced film by Mammootty's new production company and Lijo Jose Pellissery's production company. So they did this together. And it's, like I said, it's interesting. Mammootty may have been an influence. I don't know, the cinematographer, since he had worked with him in his film Paranba. And both of us have discussed many times that we really admire Mammootty for doing more experimental kind of films, more out there kind of films. For, you may want Mammootty to do certain things, and he's still doing popular commercial kind of films, but he's also choosing, like Paranba, especially, as the one that I'm like, oh my God, the movie was so. I just so unexpected things that happened in the film, things that were discussed in the film. And so I think he's using, I love it when stars use their powers for good, as I say. Not that Lijo Jose Pellissery at this point can't get any film that he would want to make pretty much made, but the fact that they chose as their collaboration together, which was such a big thing, because I mean, Nanpakal Diaries had so many actors that were brand new, right? Like for them, here's Lijo Jose Pellissery doing one of his first movies with a really big star, and then they do this essentially art film together, right? All right, so summarizing a little bit more of the plot, I think hopefully if you're watching this, you've seen it, but they're on this bus and coming back to Kerala, and everyone on the bus except the driver, fortunately, falls asleep. And James, Mammootty's character, wakes up, and they're just in the middle of this field, and he tells the driver to stop. He gets out of the bus, everyone else is still asleep, and he purposely walks through a village. He walks to this house, and he sees a clothesline, and he's wearing a white mundu, and he takes that off, and he puts on this, the plaid,
the checkered lungi.
lungi, right? Walks into the house, interacts with this elderly blind woman, and then is calling out to a younger woman who's asleep, alone on this a pallet, and walks in the kitchen. Oh, are we out of coffee? Do I need to go to the grocery store? Like, just, oh, you only made soup? Should I go pick? Like, it's like he picked up a conversation, and everyone is just kind of confused, except for the blind elderly woman. She's just completely accepting of everything that happens. And we should just mention, even though she's blind and wearing sunglasses, she's constantly watching, or she's constantly listening to
old Tamil movies.
Old movies on a black and white television. And so,
actually, let me just jump in there too, because one of the comments I saw online was somebody saying that they really loved that because it reminded them of going to visit grandparents in one of these tiny villages. And the old people who don't have a lot to do all day sit there and watch old movies all day. So, there was a little bit of nostalgia peeking out for some people in this film.
But it's like what is not obvious wasn't obvious to my ear is that he is suddenly speaking in Tamil. So at the beginning of the film, he is speaking in Malayalam. Through the subtitles, we learn that he is speaking in Tamil to everyone in this village, and that when the people from the bus come to look for him, there's comments back and forth from villagers like, why are these people gibbering in Malayalam, and they just, or we can understand them because they're speaking Tamil. So there is some indicators, but both of us kind of wish that this film had been a little bit like the series Pachinko, which is on Apple TV. Now there's, I think, like 4 different languages or something spoken in that series, and they color coded the different languages so you would know, because sometimes the speaker would slip between two. They would speak Japanese and then do one sentence in Korean or whatever, so that you would understand that these are people straddling, different languages and different cultures. And so I almost wish that, there had been care with the subtitles to make it. And so I evidently the title and everything was kind of confusing when people saw the poster, because it's in like Malayalam script, but yet there's Tamil words, so I'm wondering how people in Kerala, like, I know so many people are multilingual, but because so much of this Malayalam film is in Tamil, it's just kind of interesting, because all of James now Sundaram, his interactions with everyone in the village are now in Tamil. And so there's all this confusion, because he is just now this other person.
He is Sundaram.
Right. And
he is absolutely Sundaram.
Right. And so, and he doesn't understand why, when he goes to the local coffee shop or he goes to the bar, why people don't immediately recognize him as Sundaram.
And he knows everybody's names and details about their lives. And yet they're like, they don't, nobody seems to make that connection.
Right.
They just look at him and say, well,
they're just kind of humoring him. Like, okay, he's telling us this story. Like, what? He's telling us this joke or whatever. So, and there's one incredible scene when he's in a bar, interacting with, and there's a movie playing, and remind me that you probably have it in your notes, but anyway,
I actually wrote down not all, but some of the main dualities at play in this film, because this is actually one of the most significant ones. It's from a 1973 film called Gauravam that starred Shivaji Ganeshan, and it's a double role.
Right. Okay.
Where Shivaji Ganeshan plays a judge and his lawyer nephew, I think. And I love that scene, because let's note too that this is the scene that would have been like kind of at the interval point. It's halfway through the film.
Okay.
And he's in the bar, and the frame is divided by 2 lights, one red and one green.
Right.
And when he switches back and forth between Shivaji Ganeshan's two characters, he walks to each side of the screen. But it's also, in color theory, red and green are complementary colors, and they're considered colors that that build tension.
Mm.
So we suddenly have the first half of the film is quite absurd and often very funny. And this is kind of the signal that we're going into, like, two halves of the film are also two dualities. We're going into the second half of the film, which honestly is, for me, is profoundly sad. Because as we, this is the, we've gone through, and it's kind of amusing how James as Sundaram is interacting with all of these people. But as we get down to particularly the last 20 to 30 minutes of the film, there's this you can almost see the realization by Sundaram that something is not right here.
Right.
What's going on?
You know, like he's wandering and he's like, what's this construction here?
The new temple.
And there's a new temple. And the people are like, yeah, that's been going on for ages, you know. And so we gradually learned that this person, this husband, this father, this son, Sundaram, had gone missing 2 years ago. No one knows what happened, that the family had been praying for his return. And so, yeah, you have his Malayalam family not wanting to know what to do. Everyone, you know, there's one person on this, I got to get back and open my grocery store.
I love Ashokan's character. And he's another example of the dualities in the film, because in the opening, he's the one that goes through the lodge and knocks on everybody's door to get them moving, because he's got to get back. And he's actually one of the people that provides some impetus in this film, because he drops that at regular intervals. I've got to get going. But so that first scene, he walks down and he walks to a sink at the end of the corridor, washes his face.
Yeah.
He comes back a second time. He's dressed differently, but he knocks on everybody's door and he goes and washes his face in the sink. It's like so many doubles, so many duplicates.
Yeah. There's such mirroring. One scene that I particularly, there, as you said, the second half of the film, especially, there's all this conflict of how the Sally, his Malayalam wife, is like, what has happened to my husband? What do I do? Is he mentally ill? How do I get him home when he's refusing to come? There's discussion about drugging him, of forcibly bringing him back. She's like, I don't know what to do. And then you can see the family of Sundaram like, okay, they how do we deal with this? This man doesn't look, but he acts like our father, like our husband, like our son that we've been missing. Do we just reject that and say that he should leave when this is what we've been wishing? This is what's been absent from our life, having this present. So there's this incredible scene where Sundaram's wife and daughter are in the frame of a window, and then James, the Malayalam wife, and her teenage son are standing outside the house. And just the way the shot is framed and the mirroring of the two wives with their children, and it just was so striking. There's so many visual things, but especially that particular scene stuck with me. And the other thing is, I realized they had this tension through the entire film because there was never, ever a close-up shot of anyone's face, especially not Mammootty. It was all from a distance, frequently framed through doorways, windows, but especially doorways, as if here's the stage, And it was only until the moment when Mammootty as Sundaram goes to a barber.
Oh my God, that scene.
And then,
oh my God, I cried.
And then he looks in the mirror. That's 3/4 of the way through the film is our first close-up shot of Mammootty's face. And only someone like Mammootty can convey so many emotions as he sees this stranger's face in the mirror. Like, he completely believes he's Sundaram, but the mirror is showing him something completely different. And he had said to the
cry
barber,
again.
where's this other barber? And the guy's like, well, he's been dead.
He's been dead for 2 years.
He's been dead for all this time. He's like, what? So that was striking to me again, just this master cinematographer shaping our audience, because we have this unease because we're so used to a mix of shots, a mix of long shots, a mix of medium shots, a mix of close-ups, that to never have a close-up of Mammootty's face or anyone else's face for that matter until 3/4 of the way through the film, that gives the impact to that moment even more.
Yep,
like
exactly.
even more impact. It's incredible because before that, Mammootty has this huge monologue where everyone is trying to encourage him to, wake up and realize he's someone, and he has this, scene where he's talking to everyone in the crowd. Am I not your son? Am I not your husband? Am I not your father? And just like, do I not know you? Do I not know you? Didn't I not grow up in this village? This incredible scene, and again, all from a distance, and in fact, sometimes from behind, like we're standing behind the crowd, seeing Mammootty do this through a little peek of people. Like we're not like right in Mammootty's face. We're like yep. way in the back. Like, okay, I'm sitting in the theater towards the back of the theater, looking through other people to see. So incredible cinematography, and also I'm sure it's a partnership with Lijo Jose Pellissery. How these shots were put together and the tension it puts in the audience and adds to the drama. I mean, there's, just like I said, contrasting with other Lijo Jose Pellissery films, this is not a film full of action. And
I want to go back a little bit to that because, like you said, you came in with Angamali Diaries. And I actually came to Lijo Jose Pellissery through Amen, which is probably his most commercially accessible film. Mm. Probably the only one that's really commercially accessible. And I adored that. But it got me to go and find his 2 earlier films, Mayakkam, which I actually love, and City of God, which is also an interestingly constructed film. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people have been saying, he's moving in new directions. But I do think he is taking a step back. Because those early films, too, those 3 early films, he worked with established actors. Right. Mayakkam had Indrajit as the lead. We had Tilakan, we had Siddiq. City of God had a huge cast. Also Indrajit and Prithviraj, Rima Kalingal, Parvati, many. And it was an exercise in
Fahad Fazal. Yeah, I mean,
yeah. So you've got these 3 films with really established people, and then he makes the jump off point to do. He did Double Barrel, which was like completely kind of experimental and off the wall. And I thought, is he trying to get something out of his system? Because he also wrote that, and I think that's the only film he's written. Although, like, this film was a story that he gave to Hareesh, who wrote the actual script. I also found it interesting that the films I like the least are Jallikattu and the one right after Jallikattu. Churli, yes. Yeah. And I was I wasn't surprised I didn't care for Jallikattu as much, because at that point I was kind of getting tired about all the, toxic masculinity. Mm-hmm. And even though there's a purpose for this in the film, I thought it was better done in Angamali Diaries.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that, yeah.
I think Jallikattu is a technically beautiful film. And I did get the tension.
And unforgettable certain set pieces and scenes that I will never forget, but.
And very much I felt unsettled through the whole film, which I do think was the point. But it was just such an uncomfortable feeling for me that I didn't feel I could give myself over to the film. Truly, I thought I would love, because its framing device is kind of a folktale. But I I spent the film going, okay, I get what they're doing here. It didn't work for me.
Right.
So and both of those films are written by Hareesh. Mm. So when I came to this and I knew he was the writer, I had a lot of trepidation coming into it, thinking, is this going to be the same? Am I going to have the same feeling? Because I don't want to constantly be disappointed by directors and writers whose previous films I really adored. So this film honestly just blew me away. And one of the other things that like people often say when talking about how you have these two big stars, Mammootty and Mohanlal, at the center of Malayalam cinema, and how they coexist, is that Mohanlal is for the heart and Mammootty is for the head. This is very much a film for the head.
Yes.
Even though there are those emotional moments, like you really feel for the two wives
Oh,
in
yeah.
this.
Oh, yeah.
And that scene with the mirror where Sundaram realizes he's not looking into his own face. Like there are some really painful emotional moments. The blind mother, who when Sundaram walks out the door and leaves with the theater troupe that are on this pilgrimage, she's crying. And how interesting is it that the only two beings that seem to recognize Sundaram are his mother, who can't see him, and his dog.
Right, because at the very last scene, the dog is running after the bus.
Yep.
You know, the dog immediately recognized him. You know, never barked, never. You know, I mean, when Mammootty, as Sundaram makes a motion here, come here, you know, to the dog immediately comes. You know, this is one that's definitely of the head. You know, I think about like Ima Yao being so raw, and just wrenching. And I mentioned before we started recording that my father was actually a professor of philosophy, and I don't know, so much feel like things that are deep and philosophical just go over my head. Like this is a movie that is really examining deep issues, has so many layers to it, and you know, you can watch it at a certain cursory level. So here am I, a viewer that cannot tell, except for clues within the subtitles, that people are speaking different languages. Okay, so I'm not getting that clue, but just Mammootty's mastery. You can see the way that he had been in the opening scenes as James, and when he walks off that bus, you don't know exactly what has changed, but you can see even the way he's walking, the way he's carrying himself. Even if I don't know that he's suddenly speaking Tamil, Mammootty is so masterful that he doesn't have to be speaking with words for me to know something's off, something's different, something's changed here about this character. And he is masterful in doing that. The end of the film, when he wakes up and is James again, even before, well, but even before,
let's talk about that after.
But even before he says a word, just the way he's carrying himself, I could tell, okay, something has changed, something is different. Like he's just a master actor and using physicality to tell us about these characters. Just and I absolutely love that. So, and even if I don't know all the references to the classical films that, for instance, the mother is watching, what is masterful is that they've chosen moments of those films so that it's that classic filmy kind of music in the background, which provides you the, you know, kind of dun dun dun, you know, like, you know, either tension, you know, either funny music or tension music or sad music or whatever from these classic films. You don't have to, I don't know the reference to these classic Tamil films, but you don't need that because they've chosen these cues to tell you the kind of scene. But there's so many different films, and I have, you know, the subtitles did give us the dialogues from the film, so I knew it was a lot of "Don't you recognize me?" or, you know, kind of mistaken identity or whatever kind of films. You know, I could tell that those were the kind of films that were being referenced, even if I didn't immediately. And I'm wondering, like, a young audience watching this, are they going to know every single reference to all these classic films? You know?
No, and you know that even though I watch Tamil films and old ones, I don't always pick up on the references either. I had to do a lot of research for this film.
Right.
Thankfully, the Netflix subtitled those things because they are literally the background score for this film.
Right. Exactly.
And that kind of stuff often doesn't get subtitled. But
Exactly.
here is, halfway through our conversation, here is the tip for people. At the beginning of the film, everyone speaks Malayalam. When Mammootty gets off the bus, he's speaking Tamil, and everyone in the village speaks Tamil.
Right.
So that's sort of your tip sheet here for
right.
if you can't hear the difference in the languages. That yeah, and I do wonder myself, because I know that there are some words that are shared between the two languages, but I don't know how mutually intelligible they are to one speaker or the other. The only reference I have is my mother speaks Ukrainian, and she will often say that she can understand like Polish films or Russian films. She couldn't speak to those people, but she can get kind of the gist of things. So my feeling is there are people who will kind of get the gist of both of what's going on in each of those languages, and I suspect that's what's at work in what's happening with the two groups, because they do converse to each other.
Right. I mean, I'm just wondering, like, when this film was shown at a Kerala Film Festival, I think in December, and then it had a theatrical release in Kerala in January, and like I said, it just came on Netflix last week. So,
actually, I did look up some figures, because what I heard was it didn't do brilliantly at the box office. It had a very small window of release.
Okay.
And I was looking up, because people have started looking at numbers now already for 2023, and sort of the top 5 films right now at the Kerala box office. One is Romancham, which just came out 2 weeks ago, and it's done blistering numbers.
Right.
That's 31.6 crore, which is actually really good for a Malayalam film. Second was Pathan. Not surprising. That was a huge release. Third was Varisu. So that's a Vijay film. He's very popular in Kerala. Fourth is Christopher, Mammootty film. And fifth is Nanpakal Nerathu Mayakkam. And the earnings from the box office were about 5 crore.
Right. I mean,
it's going to drop down as the year goes on. But so the reception at the International Film Festival of Kerala was like, people started coming onto Malayalam film subreddit and like praising this film to the high heavens. And then we had the theatrical release, and people were coming into the subreddit saying, I went to this film with my family and my father fell asleep in the cinema. And I think that's kind of a key, that this is very much more a film that appeals to a less massy commercial theatrical audience, and is much more a film festival thing, because it's so philosophical. Like, people were saying, oh my God, it's so slow. It is. It is. And you have all of these static shots. So if you're primed for a massy Mammootty film, this is not it.
This is not.
yeah, exactly. So if people are going in and saying, like, I don't think I'm seeing the same film as everybody else, well, no, you're not. And that's the beauty of film, is that each of us will bring things to a film, and each of us will take things from a film. And if you're finding this film is slow and not for you, that's okay. There are Bhishma Parvams out there. But for people like me, like, this is really my wheelhouse. This is the center of my wheelhouse.
I mean, I was so excited that when you agreed to come on and talk about this, because I was just like, you had just been, you made me excited to see the film, and I would just be completely honest. This isn't my favorite Lijo Jose Pellissery film. It's not my favorite Mammootty film. However, it's a film I more admire than I love, right? Like, I really admire the film. I admire the cinematography. I'm so glad I saw it once, but is this a film I'm going to watch over and over again? Probably not.
and for me, it's the opposite. I've already watched it twice in the last few days. And I sat down this morning and I thought, do I organize my notes or do I watch the film another time? Like, I just adore it. And I'm so relieved, because as I said earlier, the last few films didn't touch me as a viewer. And I really thought, well, maybe Lijo Jose Pellissery is no longer a director for me. So this really excited me. It's like, okay, you've brought me back. Like it's like Nayakan, his first film. I mean, it really is a first film. You can see the creaky first filmness of it. But he frames it as a like a Kathakali performance, which is a traditional art in Kerala, and the theme is a famous Kathakali master has a son played by Indrajit who has rejected this art because it doesn't make any money, and he wants to make money. And the father and the daughter they see something they shouldn't have seen, and they're killed for it. So Indrajit decides to enter the underworld, and that's how he hooks up with Tilakan's character, who's like an underworld don. But the whole film is framed like a Kathakali performance, and there are intertitle cards that give you the various stages of Kathakali. So it's a very thinky film on some level, and you can just accept it. You can go with the flow that this is a man trying to get revenge for the death of his father and his sister, or you can also appreciate these layers. So I really do think, in some ways, this film is a little bit more of what I saw when I first encountered Lijo Jose Pellissery, and that's exciting for me. That's really exciting.
This movie is very much like a play.
Yes,
it's a movie that has basically this one central idea. It's not a movie that has, like you say, a mass movie where we have a completely different feeling in the first half, and then we have a completely different feeling in the second half. It's very contemplative, meditative. Like I said, just the way that it is shot is it makes you feel like I'm watching a play. Everything is framed as if this is the stage that we are watching all of these events unfold. And so it just has a very different feeling. It's not a big massy kind of a movie or a masala with a lot of different mix of emotions and things. There's moments of comedy. There's moments of darkness, but it's not like a wildly, switching from emotion to emotion. And, so it is, and it's under 2 hours. Again, it's not just this like sprawling, a movie that just goes on forever and takes all these different things. It's very much an art film. And so I really admire it. It has so many layers to it. Because as I said, I can come into it with my limited knowledge, and the subtitles are giving me clues when people are switching languages. But you can't help but think, okay, how does someone who is really a fan of Tamil cinema and classic, how are they reacting to all of these movie references that I'm not getting? I can know enough to know, okay, this is a classic movie that this blind mother is watching, but I don't know, like, oh, now they're alluding to that scene. Oh, you know what I mean? And I'm seeing Mammootty in the bar, and he's enacting this entire, double monologue, going back and forth, playing different parts in this very, impactful scene. And I'm like, I have never seen that movie. I can see that he's playing out some famous scene, but I don't have the resonance of like, oh, they're choosing that scene, like I don't have that. So
well, and there is actually a Malayalam film reference in here too. When they get on the bus, first there's a movie playing.
Right. Yeah.
This is a Mammootty film, so this is a very meta moment. It's
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. It's a film called Parampara from 1990, directed by Sibi Malayalam, and it means a succession, but it's also Mammootty in a double role. Like, I was like, dudes. It's sort of funny to see James sort of sitting back being, this movie.
That's what I mean. Like, after I've watched that, then you learn all these references, and you're like, oh my gosh, look what they did there. Look what they did in that scene. Look how they as you say, so many double roles and so many different movies that they picked to reference. And again, I'm going to point you to Bharadwaj if you want kind of if you're not a scholar of Tamil film history, watch his review, because he highlights and explains some of the different songs that were chosen, and different movies.
Yeah, and I thought, why did I not see that first before I sat down and had to research them all? Could have saved me some time.
I know, but I'm sure you enjoyed going down that rabbit hole. I know you
Actually, I did. I very much quite did. Do we want to talk about the various theories about what's going on here? Since we're spoiling.
We're spoiling everything, yeah.
There are a lot of this. Again, this is like great. Subreddit has been just chewing on all of these ideas, and it's so much fun to see people trying to find the references in the films. So, the most basic theory is it's just a dream. James falls asleep on the bus, has this dream, then wakes up and they go home. But it doesn't really work because, as somebody pointed out, if that were the case, then he would be in the same seat on the bus that he was at the beginning before he got off. And he's not. He's in a window seat looking out across those fields at the village. So, okay, that's a theory. Not my favorite. It's an idea for the play because we have this whole thing. He even says when he talks to the desk clerk, when the desk clerk mentions the title of the work that this is from, it means something like sacred texts or something like that. But he says, oh, that would be a good title for a play. So, maybe he's looked across at the village and this idea is churning in his head and he's come up with a play. Again, for me, that doesn't really fit in with the rest of the film. There's a really interesting theory that was put out on Twitter. The user is at ARCA_DAIN, who suggests that what's going on here is a dissociative fugue, where someone suddenly has this kind of memory loss or a fugue state, and they can't remember who they are, or they can't remember anything about their past. This is another one that I don't buy into totally, but it's a really interesting idea, and the Twitter user has actually provided examples from the film to explain this theory. So it is a well-argued theory, and it's quite interesting. So the last one that people are bandying about is spiritual possession, that James is suddenly possessed by the spirit of Sundaram. This one actually is the most interesting to me because it pulls together a lot of the little details in the film, even though it does still leave us with questions. But the whole idea is Sundaram's spirit possessing James just for this single day, and he leaves when he realizes no one will accept him anymore. Or, and I think the film is open-ended enough for this, does he leave? It's quite possible at the end that it's still Sundaram. But there's also this scene, the scene where he goes back to the house after visiting the barber shop, and he's quite upset. And they serve him a meal, and he's crying. Like, oh my God, that scene.
And his mother is like, stop crying, just eat. And,
But he gets up, and he walks out, and his shadow remains on the wall.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, there's actually a little glitch in the CGI because it's a split screen, and in order to get the shadow to stay, Mammootty walks out, but he sort of disappears into a pillar. But what happens in the film is he actually walks outside, and that's when he goes to lie down for the next sleep. But yeah, there's this moment where, and even during the meal, we get these cuts to shots of crows. And apparently there's a belief amongst Tamils that crows are sort of the spirits or contain the spirits of our dead
loved ones.
Dead loved ones. And to feed crows is to make sure that your loved one is fed in the afterlife.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know if that was the intention, but cutting to those frames of crows seems intentional at that point. So yeah,
Bharadwaj mentioned that showing all the religious imagery in the opening scenes of this Catholic site that they've done this pilgrimage sets us in a mind of miracles could happen, right? And so it's completely interesting. James is Catholic, Sundaram, is Hindu. Like, but we just learned this morning, a friend who was back visiting family in India, she's like, oh, it's so interesting. She started watching the movie. She's like, it's so interesting that it's this site because there's a little bit of blurring of religious practice at the site, and so
Yeah, and I actually had that in my notes because there's a book called the Routledge Handbook of Hindu-Christian Relations, and they mention this site specifically alongside a number of them as a site where religious borders blur.
Yeah.
So, like,
and that's again something that I didn't know going into the film, but so fascinating to learn after watching it, because obviously it's so intentional to pick. They could have done pilgrimages, all sorts of places, but it was this specific place that has this meaning,
this kind of duality,
right? And all of this imagery, and you think about all the people that go to a pilgrimage site and are saying these prayers, asking for a miracle in their own life, right? And Sundaram's family has been praying for a miracle. Their father, their son, their husband had vanished. They don't know what happened, and they're just praying for his return because they're holding out hope that he's still alive somewhere. And so they get their prayers answered in a way, but they don't know how to kind of deal with the fact that their prayers were answered, right? Because this extraordinary thing has happened, but he doesn't look like their husband, their father. I mean, especially the teenage daughter. I love her.
Oh yeah.
How could you, how could you let him just walk into our house, But then the way Mammootty as Sundaram is, asking her, have you done your homework? I'm sure you haven't even started. Like, just probably the things that this teenage daughter has missed hearing, having, just like all of them are so conflicted. Like, we know the right thing is to let this man go back to Kerala, but how can we let go what we've been missing? These just simple everyday interactions of him feeding the cows, laying his head in his mother's lap, and while she's listening to the, just all of these small moments that they've missed, right? And so, that's really that conflict, like you say, that, your heart is breaking for both of the wives because, one, it's not even that she necessarily knows that she's a widow. Her husband has just vanished, and so we're left. Still at the end, no one knows what happened. We don't have those questions answered of what happened to Sundaram. I mean, we assume because his spirit entered James, he died in some way, but no one knows. Still, at the end of the movie, we don't know what happened.
Well, and let's take note of the song that plays too, the Viduvare Urevu song, and the lyrics are, after I die, my wife will go as far as the street. My son will accompany me to the cemetery, but no one accompanies me into death.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's in the moment where he's changing his back into James's clothing.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, oh my God. Like honestly, the second half of the film, I just cried buckets. I'm still tearing up thinking about this. So like that may be kind of an indication too that Sundaram is still in James, and that he's made the decision that, okay, no one will accept me as like this. So I have to accept that I'm dead, and this is my new body, and I will go here. Yeah. It's the last words he says, "Let's go," are actually Malayalam. So I mean, again, it's like, is it James? Is it Sundaram?
Right.
Another argument for it still being Sundaram is that he leads them out of the village.
Right, he does. Yes.
And if it were James, how could he do it?
Way. Yeah, he knows.
Yeah,
I definitely noted that. Like he's purposely walking through the streets, which are all windy. Right? Like it's not like, oh, I can see like he purposely knows exactly where to go. This is a film that has so many layers, and like you have watched it multiple times already. I'm sure you're looking forward to seeing it again because you can the shadow. Like I completely did not catch that.
Yeah, I didn't get it the first time either.
Like, wow.
Because the first time I was taking notes, and I shouldn't have done that the first time. The second
I was taking
I
notes too, because I just didn't want to forget like certain moments. Like I definitely wrote down, the mirroring scene of the wives. I wanted to write down like there's no close-ups in this. Even
Yeah.
before we got to the barbershop, I wrote a note like there's no close-ups. I mean, not that I am an expert on film language and the way.
Neither am I.
Okay, but anyone would like you. I was like, why are you having this unsettled feeling? And then I realized what it was. So that we're so used to a mix of shots that when we don't have it, it feels very odd.
And it is a very theatrical.
It's very theatrical.
That is one of the things that is off-putting for people. But again, that like for me, that just fed me, because it was just more to think about. And let's go back actually and make a mention, because I do want to talk about Lijo Jose Pellissery's father a little bit, because he's a star kid. Hello.
I had no clue.
Well, I'm using star in quotes, but he was, he acted in about 100 films. So not unknown. He was more known, I think, for his theater and his theater troupe, the Sarati theaters, and that's referenced in the last shots of the film, because on the back of the bus there's a sign that's Sarati theaters, and there's their performance is a film called Oradata, which means someplace, somewhere. There's actually I think it's a G.R. Ravindan film called Oradata, and it's the English title is There Was a Village, and it's a village that gets electricity, so they're sort of a stand-in for every village.
Right.
And it's written by Tilikan, who was part of this troupe. And I was like, and you noted already the pictures in the end, which are photographs of Jose Pellissery's, Lijo's father's troupe, and you will see Tilikan. If you don't know Tilikan, please seek out Tilikan, and I would suggest maybe Ustad Hotel as a first start, because it's a very low stakes kind of film. It's one of his last performances. He is so fabulous in it, and the relationship between grandfather and grandson in that film is just so warm and wonderful, and that's Tilikan. That's Tilikan.
That was my first film seeing him, and I agree with you. You're like, wow, who is this presence? Even if you don't know the history, you just know, okay, this is.
And he's played some terrible characters over the years too. He's so versatile. He was so versatile and so good. But I often think, what a lovely way to have a career ended with this really beautiful portrayal.
And so if you think about this film, and especially Lijo Jose Pellissery, including those pictures of his father at the end. I mean, so many Indian films, this is in honor of my father, this is honor of my grandfather, and they show the pictures at the beginning of the film. We've seen that over and over again. But learning what I have about Lijo Jose Pellissery's father and seeing those pictures at the end makes me think, I mean, I have no idea what kind of plays, his troupe did, but this definitely seems an ode to his father, an ode to his theatrical career, because it is very much like, I've just seen this very philosophical play for 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
And so that it just makes me think that this is definitely a tribute to his father in so many ways, honoring his theatrical troupe, honoring all of those origins, and so that makes, that's just even another layer on top, right?
Yeah, again. Oh, and small aside, back to his father, he won a national award for his, a Kerala State Award for his theater work.
Right.
So award-winning father.
Right.
Yeah, and see, this is why I feel kind of the connections to his very early films too, which were more philosophical in some ways. Like his first film stars Tilikan, and his latest film honors Tilikan.
Right. Yeah.
How wonderful is that?
Yeah. So it's interesting how this film didn't, theatrical audiences maybe didn't respond to it. It wasn't a hit. Again, it's not a film. I mean, it's a film that you enjoy seeing over and over again, but it's not necessarily the kind of film that a mass audience is going to want to see.
No, so
it's not like, oh yeah, I want to go back and see that fight sequence again, or oh, I need to see those 3 songs again, or whatever. Like, it's not that kind of a film, but it is perfect for streaming. I mean,
yeah,
I'm sure the cinematography would have been amazing to see on a big screen,
it's so lovely.
But it is the kind of film that I think is perfect for our world of streaming, where you can watch it again and again at home, or, I want to see that one scene again or whatever. And like you, going back, well, what was that old movie that was referenced in that particular scene? And so that you can really dive deep and enjoy this film and explore the layers of it. And also streaming is really perfect for these art films that you can just enjoy in your own home, in your own living room, and really absorb it and think about it. So I think, you wonder, like, back in the day when they didn't have streaming, the fact that we're having all of these internet discussions about this film because everyone can watch it at the same time on streaming. It's been released worldwide on Netflix. Again, because of the success that Lijo Jose Pellissery has had with so many other films, Netflix snatched this film up and put it out. And Malayalam films don't often, it's not often that the channel is straight to Netflix, right? So here in the U.S., it seems to be more Amazon Prime. But again,
and there's a
wider audience worldwide to be able to see films that come on Netflix.
There very much was a time, I'm going back maybe 5, 6, a little more years ago, where you would have these kind of parallel cinema, art house, independent kind of feeling films that would play at festivals, that would win Kerala State Awards for Best Picture, and they would never get a theatrical release, and they were almost impossible to find.
Right.
So that really has changed things because like this film had a small theatrical release. I'm not surprised by the numbers it did. That seems right for the type of film it did. Type of film it is.
There's hardcore Lijo Jose Pellissery fans. There's hardcore Mammootty fans that would see any film that either of them made, right? But then, the general, like you had the example of the person who's, took the whole family expecting one kind of film and the father fell asleep or whatever. It's not necessarily a film for the whole family, to go see.
No, it's not. And I would never say it is. And I would say, look, it's on Netflix. Give it a try.
If you come all the way through here with all of our spoilers, but yeah, if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend you see it. And again, it's under 2 hours. If you're a fan of Lijo Jose Pellissery, you should definitely give it a watch. If you're a fan of Mammootty, you're going to see one. I mean, the performances this man is giving in this last part of his career, I can only admire the kind of choices that he is making. Like I just because I'm sure this is the first film of his own production company doing this co-production with Lijo Jose Pellissery, that you can imagine the anticipation for months and months, or however long it's been since they announced that they were going to work together. And probably everybody's thinking, oh, it's going to be, some really fancy, we're going to, they're thinking it's going to be Bhishma Parvam, that we're going to get some big, right?
No, and actually I knew I wasn't going to get that.
Right. But I would imagine people would think that, but instead this is much more like Paranba, where, okay, we're going to go experimental. We're going to go art house. We're going to go an amazing acting performance, but we're not going to get Mammootty swinging his fist around and doing some big fist fight. Like, I mean, we're going to get something amazing.
But I also think if your exposure to Lijo Jose Pellissery has been just like Jallikattu, Churli, this is not what you're expecting based on that.
Right.
And I see that's why people sort of say, well, he's moved in a new direction. Yes, he very much has moved away from those last couple of films with this film. Now, the interesting thing is his next film is starring Mohanlal. So, and we have talked before how Mohanlal's last couple of years' career, with a couple of exceptions of films, things like Lucifer, which did
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
Generally, the films have not been great, and some of us kind of feel like the Mohanlal we know, who is an equally excellent actor.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like, you only have to go back to some of those older films to see, in the same way as Mammootty, that
Absolutely.
The character building and the emotion, and they both have that. So I am actually quite excited for a Mohanlal film for a change. And I'm even more excited because, just checking my notes again, the writer is going to be P.S. Rafiq, who wrote Lijo's first film, Nayakan. So I'm really excited for that, and I'm hoping they do the same kind of thing with Mohanlal that they did with Mammootty, is give us this fabulous film,
push
the star we love.
Push Mohanlal a little bit out of this comfort zone that he's been in for the last couple of years, where I just feel like he's been coasting through some of these films, and he's not. Again, I admire both of them as actors. They both have had fabulous careers, classic films. I'm not taking anything away. I'm just saying, as a fan, I've been a little disappointed in the last couple of years of Mohanlal's work.
The diehard Mohanlal fans are also disappointed, and they also want something better.
I did not know that it had already been announced that they were working together, and so I am also equally excited, because here you have this very creative filmmaker, and I'm hoping he's, first of all, that it's going to be an interesting script. Like, whatever you say about Lijo Jose Pellissery, every script has been very interesting, very different. And so I hope he pushes Mohanlal a little bit, and it's going to be something fresh and exciting for us to see. And, this was not the film that I expected this partnership to be, but I'm still thrilled because, again, Mammootty is making choices. I'm sure this was a partnership of choosing this story together. You don't, even if you're Lijo Jose Pellissery, you don't get to dictate to Mammootty what the film is going to be, right? I'm sure it was a partnership of deciding together. I mean, it was a co-production of their two. And Mammootty is choosing interesting things. I mean, he's still doing the massy movies, the commercial movies. It's sort of like there was an old interview with George Clooney, who's like, I'll do one for you and one for me, right? And so
Delush has even said he does that too.
Right, exactly. So, and that's what I admire when, big stars, they're like, okay, I will give you your massy, whatever, that you want, but then I'm going to do something really interesting, close to my heart, something different, something offbeat, art house like this, like a Paranba, like this, Well,
and Mammootty has had kind of a history of, particularly since 2010, when we saw sort of the shift into the new gen directors. Mammootty has worked with, like, he was in Ashik Kapoor's first film, I think. So he has been, in the last 10, 12 years, more willing to do that. And I mean, I'm like a teensy bit younger than Mohanlal. And I get that you get to a certain age and you sort of feel like, I've done it all.
Right.
So I have nothing.
I don't have to prove myself again. Yeah.
Well, and he doesn't. Mohanlal has an amazing legacy of films. He has nothing to prove. That said, it would be nice to see more of what we know he's fabulous at. So I've got my fingers crossed. Like, at first I heard the announcement and I went, is this going to fall through? But they seem to be, like, they did a early poster release, and we know who the writer is, so it seems to be that it's going to happen. Like, fingers crossed,
fingers closed, everything crossed,
because I think it's a really interesting development, because quite honestly, I'm so tired of being disappointed with these films.
Absolutely.
But
so we could talk for hours about this film because it has so much layers to it. But I'm so thankful that you were willing, on the spur of the moment. Even before I saw the film, I was just like, okay, the way Catherine's talking about this, I have to have her on, because I would have been completely at sea to do a review by myself, I think, on this film, because there's just so much I learned from your talking about the film, and I wanted, my viewers to say, because there's just so much meat here to discuss about this film. And, just doing a little 10-minute, cursory review just doesn't cut it for a film like this. It demands a deeper discussion and letting viewers know there are all of these layers to the film. If pointing out, you pointed out things just in the last hour to me that I had no idea. And so I said, I don't want to watch it again, but now I sort of do because, I admire it. I don't know if I'm going to watch it right away, but I can see myself, learning more, maybe watching, again, Bharadwaj and knowing some of the references and maybe looking up some of the films that are referenced in the film to know, okay, this is what they're trying to say in this particular scene. They're referencing this or whatever. And there's so many messages in the film and unanswered questions. And I love that too, right? Everything is not tied up in a bow for the audience, right? It leads itself to debate, to discussion. Well, what do you think really happened? What do you think this ending means? What do you think it means that the dog was chasing the bus, for instance, right? They're giving us so many little clues, but they're leaving it. I love that too, that they're leaving it to the audience to decide for themselves and interpret for themselves what they think it means to them.
And one of the things Lijo Jose Pellissery is known for is incorporating sort of like magic realism into his films. And this is another one that's like that. And I have a quote from a Mexican critic called Luis Leal, who said, if you can explain it, it's not magical realism.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so the film is just a perfect example because, like, I laid out, like, there are so many theories of what happened. And this film is, like, perfectly, magically realistic in this way because there's so many directions we could think of as an audience to try and figure out what it all is. And maybe there is no real answer at the end.
Right. Or it's what it means personally to you, or it could be like, for instance, I only have a cursory understanding of the Mahabharata or whatever. Maybe there's some, I know the dog, Bharadwaj mentioned the dog being an allusion to, part of that. The dog knowing, the master. But there's probably other symbolism and things with that I'm not catching, and other viewers in Tamil Nadu and Kerala are watching and are like, oh yeah, so there's probably layers there that I'm not catching. But that's the beauty of this film, is that each person can come with their own experiences and their own opinions and get different things out of it. So anyway, kudos to Lijo Jose Pellissery. Kudos to this amazing cinematographer, Tony Eswar. I hope we see many more films from the cinematographer because it's incredible what was brought to the screen in front of us. Like, it's so different feeling from so many other films in Indian cinema. And also, of course, kudos to Mammootty for gracing us again with another incredible, different performance, not the everyday. All right. Thank you so much, Katherine, for joining me.
You're most welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Anytime, any film you're like, I can't wait to talk about this, you know who to call, because I'd love to have you on again. All right. Thanks again. If you want to read more and experience more of Katherine's musings on Malayalam film, you definitely need to check out her podcast, Palandini Pate, and her totallyfilmy.com blog. And also we did a video together with her partner Harsha on the best Malayalam films of 2022. I definitely will link that in the description, so you should definitely check that out. Follow me on Twitter at PardesiYT and on Instagram at Pardesi Reviews.